tell this story, but first of all, I want to speak to Houston. I feel it with the call Azusa. Or the reason we felt like we really needed to connect with Houston, for one thing, because of Doug Stringer. I actually think, Doug, you were pioneering the solemn assemblies years before the call ever got started, when you were gathering thousands, I think, into a stadium or a field here in Houston. I think there's something in Houston, partly because I think the anointing on Doug and others, John Bassanio and others, that I believe that God is using Houston kind of as a flashpoint for this revival. I believe that William Seymour, he was really the father of the Azusa Street revival, but he came out of Azusa. People say, well, Azusa, came out of Houston. Houston had the racism, and so they threw him out. We talked about this last night. No, I believe Parham's anointing rested here. In spite of the Jim Crow laws and in spite of the racism, there was something that came here, so that when William Seymour came, I actually believe he carried an anointing that was residual right here in Houston and brought it in. In other words, I don't want to look to Azusa. I want you to look to Houston to prepare the way for Azusa. Something is here for Azusa that I think is important. I think it's important that when we had the outpouring of the Spirit in Pasadena, California, the revival that broke out in 1994, Tommy Tenney came here. And you know the story with Tommy Tenney, when the pulpit split. Maybe you don't know that story, but you should know that story. And that pulpit split sovereignly by the power of God. He came to Pasadena, and when he came, I'll never forget it, the whole place was on their faces. God invaded that place. And he and I, after that outpouring, that movement that took place, he and I went to Bonnie Bray Street. And prophetic weirdos as we are, we drove a stake in Bonnie Bray. God remembers, when I got into my car, I turned it on, it was 222. I know that's weird too, but I had been getting bombarded by this. And I know it's Isaiah 22:22. I've given you the keys. We locked onto that in 1995, 1996. Who would have guessed that we would be going back there, because the Lord, I believe, was releasing keys in that day. It came from that Houston breakout. I think there's something there on this. Then I went to the response here in Texas. It was in Austin, right? Yeah, it was in Houston. And I was really in a pretty broken point of my life. And but the response took place, and I actually felt the pleasure of God in that stadium that day. And that night I had a dream. And in this dream, I was in a beaten up old car. I think it was kind of like the story of my life. See, a beaten up old car. I staggered out of the car, and I looked up and I saw the angelic choir. And they began to sing music like I had never heard in my whole life. And in the dream, I'm just wailing and weeping under the glory of God. I think there was something that came in that gathering that released a glory dimension. And almost to me, it was more like a prophecy that something was coming out of that time, that I was going to enter into a realm of the waterfall of God, the glory dimension of God, something beyond. We are just so earth, where gravitational pull has pulled us down, but there is a dimension of heaven that's coming. And I woke up wailing, weeping, saying to my wife, I've just touched heaven. I believe that spirit was in Houston that night. So I want you to stand, and I want to bless Houston.